Hi everyone, my name is Beth Grabowski and I am the Faculty Director for the Northwestern University MSA program. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar and to thank you for spending some time with us today. For those who may not be familiar with our program, Northwestern University offers a Master of Arts in Sports Administration. Our goal with the program is really to help our students stand out in a very crowded sports marketplace by offering classes that will give our students skills to really differentiate themselves, as well as offering networking opportunities, because this industry is quite a bit about who you know and being in the right place at the right time. So amongst our faculty and fellow students, we really provide some robust opportunities on that front as well. I'm really excited about some new electives that we're offering, things like IT and sports and strategic social media, again, that are really going to provide those very specific and special skill sets for our students. In addition to excellent classes and faculty with fantastic sports industry experience, the program really does set itself apart with the Northwestern brand and the fact that Chicago is one of the most sports-saturated cities in the world, which really provides great opportunities for our students in both internship opportunities, volunteering, and again, some more of that networking that I referred to. So we hope you'll look us up online for further information, and we're very pleased to be a part of this webinar series. So on the note of our great faculty, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Dan Magala, one of our esteemed instructors, to introduce today's special guest.
And as we look back, I mean, here we are 31 years later. You know, 3 decades ago, would, you know, the 24, 23-year-old version of yourself have ever imagined that you'd be sitting here then 30 years later as the CEO of the organization?
No, it's really been a blessing every day. And, you know, I guess when I think back to that time, you know, I always had confidence in myself, but I didn't know what it was like in the private world of industry. So I would say as one of the things that at the time I didn't realize it was a smart step, but I do now, was talking to people who I trusted, who could give me advice from a different perspective about whether or not, you know, that type of a step was a good move or not, and what are my alternatives, and what would I gain from that experience. And I know that one of the things that made me go into pro sports was just knowing that I would probably make so many great contacts that wherever my career path would send me, I would be in a good place. And that is one piece of advice I would leave, is that try to make as many contacts as you can, even in areas that are a little bit maybe not directly involved, in my case in pro football, but people who have access to individuals in that profession. You just never know where life's going to lead you and what kind of different opportunities are going to come up along the way.
Well, and you know, look at that. So you're an accounting major, you know, working on public tax, and then, you know, 3, 4, 5 years later, you know, you're at the NFL franchise. When you get in, you know, and the students will talk a lot about the first 90 days on a job, you know, as kind of a critical point of making a good impression, making impact, listening, all those things that are key management variables to success. But when you got in versus look at it from the outside, what do you recall about, you know, that first couple months on the job? You know, I imagine, you know, there's the drinking from the fire hose analogy that a lot of students use. You know, that you're exposed to so many different areas beyond your core area, but what can you recall and recount from those first 90 days?
Oh, it was quite a process. It wasn't quite as glorious as when you think about the National Football League and the Chicago Bears. When I started, I was shown my office, and I went into a back room that had about 200 file cabinets, and I was told, start at A and work your way through every file cabinet, and you'll get a hang of what we do here from a finance side. It was a little bit overwhelming, But one thing it did teach me is how to be self-sufficient and to really try to ask a lot of questions. The other thing that happened when I first started is George Hallis passed away 30 days after I started. So I never had the pleasure of meeting him because he had been hospitalized for several months prior to me starting. And when he left, they brought in Mike McCaskey, his oldest grandson, to be the president and CEO of the Bears. And that was about 6 weeks after I started. So I'm still going through like cabinet D out of A to Z. And I never met Michael for about the first month. So I never knew. At that point in time, I thought my career at the Bears had ended before it even really began. But what I did is I just kept plugging along, asking a lot of questions, listening to what advice people had to give me, and trying to learn and make a difference in all the different financial aspects of the company. And somehow that began a period of building trust. And I think that was the biggest thing, that over the years I've shown a good work ethic, and the McCaskies have trusted me and given me many different opportunities along the way.
So a couple things as you kind of walk us through your experiences here. I hear open-mindedness, self-sufficient, building trust, is some of those early foundations to a good career. And I imagine to a certain degree there's the job that you're hired to do, and then there's the job that you do. I imagine in that point of change, you were probably pulled in directions beyond your area of expertise. Can you kind of describe what that was like? And those are pivotal moments in
Sure.
really building that trust and being self-sufficient too.
Sure. So, well, it's kind of interesting. I've never been one to have a 5-year plan. I'm not that kind of a person. And part of the reason is, in my opinion, you just never know what type of obstacles, how life might change, what opportunities come about. So you have to be flexible and know how to adjust. At the same time, I think I've shown the ability to be humble, even though I've been confident in myself. And so what happened is, after a few years at the Bears, frankly, I started to get a little bit bored. And I started to think about, well, where am I going with this job? Is there going to be another challenge? That's when I went to Kellogg. At night, it took me 4.5 years to get my master's. And I thought about halfway through, I thought there was a big opportunity that faced me, because my boss, who hired me 3 years earlier, was fired. So we no longer had a general manager in place. And it was at a time when the players went out on strike, free agency was coming, and there was no one to do player contracts. And I had never negotiated a player contract. But I had done some financial work on deferred compensation, that type of thing, behind the scenes. And so when I speak about having mentors, there was an individual at the Bears at the time, an older gentleman who was in charge of administration. His name was Bill McGrain. And he and I would sit around talking about, what are we going to do here? Because ownership was tied up in bigger issues, and they weren't really focused on who was going to handle player contracts. So I actually, at his urging, sold myself as the contract negotiator to the McCaskey family, never once having done a contract. And it was that opportunity that they gave me, whereby I then learned kind of on the fly how to negotiate, learned a lot of different communication skills, that I then had the ability to change my career while at the same time staying with the Bears in a totally different way. And then over the next 13 years, I was the sole contract negotiator, along with being the head finance person.
What was that moment like? Because I mean, I think if I'm a student right now, or if I'm just finishing Northwestern, and maybe I have a job already, or I get that job, you're there, talented students are going to get, hit a little bit of a ceiling, but then being aware of, some opportunities internally of navigating that moment, because that's a pivotal point in your life, was the history of this organization. but it's really unique because it's also, you have the skills to get your job in your area of expertise, but then really growing, and climbing the corporate ladder, if you will, managing that moment is probably difficult to look back to understand it too.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little frightening, but at the same time, I realized that, in business and life, you've got to take some risks. And I thought what would be the worst thing that would happen to me is I wouldn't have gotten that job. And I would have probably completed my master's, and maybe I would have left. Maybe I would have stayed. I'm not sure. But it's just being aware and not pigeonholing yourself into thinking that, well, I deserve this. I have to take this step. It's more a matter of just being open-minded and aware of different opportunities that come your way.
Yeah, and as now a manager and the CEO, are you more aware of that than in your staff, of kind of recognizing areas that they might not see in themselves, similar to what you might have looked at back then as well as an employee?
Yeah, Dan, I think looking back now, because of all the opportunities I was given, that one of the things that just I get most excited about now is seeing other young people at the Bears get the same kind of opportunities I had. And I probably err on the side of delegating more and more and giving them the freedom to kind of be creative, be innovative, not be afraid to take risks, and not be afraid to fail. I think that's a great question that I get asked a lot, and I think you have to show a few things to the leaders of the organization to try to move from one area to another. And one I think that I always look for is humility. You hear a lot about it nowadays, and whether it's true or not, there's a perception that it's kind of the me, everything is about me generation. To me, that's not attractive. And if you can show humility and at the same time show the ability to have, even if they're in areas, and I'm not personally into social media, but I know how important it is for our organization. You show ideas on how you can make a difference, and at the same time not only be smart about maybe some of your technical abilities, but it show why you're a good fit in the organization's culture, that you care about the culture, the tradition, that you show the ability to have the right personality to work as a team person. That's what I look for. I would emphasize that, and even more so your ability to communicate in writing, verbally, and I don't mean handwriting, but just being able to have solid written communications and verbal skills, to me, are an underappreciated talent that can really open someone's eyes and have them say, you know what, you've got the intangible skills, we're going to give you a chance in this new area.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, and for those on my background in the audience, I worked for the Chicago Bears in '99, 2000. When did you become?
99.
Okay, so '99, and I was tasked with the responsibility of building the very first Bears website, chicagobears.com. And what was interesting, and as you say what you just said, I recall advice that you gave me that was very impactful in really launching the website, was the chicagobears.com didn't really sit within a department. I mean, it was an organization-wide initiative, but the structure of it requires it to sit in an environment. So one of the things that you encouraged me to do was to go around and show the benefit to each department of this new initiative. And it was so simple now looking back that I went to public relations, community relations, tickets, sponsorships, even football operations, and I asked the equivalent of that department head, what are the 3 biggest problems that you have, and let me listen and come back with a solution. And at the time, this is crazy for all you young students there. I'm going to feel old now. In 1999, a big expense item for the Chicago Bears out of the PR department was faxing press releases. I believe in a line item about $40,000 a year, because you would have to fax them. This is well before we had Ethernet phone lines that weren't long distance, but you had so many media. So we created a page on the website, which seems very common now, for media to register to receive your press releases electronically at a savings of $40,000 to that department. So because of that, I think that was a good trust opportunity. We saved money for that department in a very selfless way. When I would go for a request that maybe seemed a little bit more out there, from an innovation standpoint, or maybe a progressive thought, that department was so much more open to helping as a result of, you were able to show the benefit to them first too.
Well, and some of the points you're making are about, and sometimes people don't like to hear it, but I always say that details matter. It doesn't mean you micromanage someone's job, but when you see someone who has a real thorough thought process and is very analytical and cares about every little detail about whatever project they're working on, that's impressive to me. And you also touch on another skill is listening. And I think back about when I was a new contract negotiator, Jim Finks at the time, the Bears ex-general manager, was at the New Orleans Saints. And I would talk to him about and learn some skills on how to be a good negotiator. And one of the biggest pieces of advice he gave me, which applies not just in negotiations, but in my opinion in any business setting, is learn to listen. And his comment would always be, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Use them in proportion. That you learn a lot more by listening and truly hearing what people are saying as opposed to talking yourself.
How has the ability to listen changed over time with different communication devices? I mean, because I imagine, from you sharing some of those negotiation stories of free agents in the 80s and 90s, by phone or in person, and now, the communication time gets shorter and less personal.
It does.
But navigating through the skill set that of those changes, what's some perspective there?
I think Dan, that I hear all the time how, well, I don't know why they didn't hear me. This is what I said, or this is what I texted, or this is what I wrote. The reality is, it's really not what you're saying. It's, you need to ask people. You need to follow up and say, are we on the same page? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because sometimes, and it happens all the time in emails or texts, that you infer attitude. Mm-hmm. You infer what someone's real intention is, and without then having that verbal communication and follow-up about what really is the intent, I think things get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and that's obviously goes for employees as well, and
absolutely,
communicating with them
all the time. And that's why the idea of being able to communicate and be clear, especially if you're sending an email or a text, and then following up to make sure people understand what your intentions are, is critical.
Yeah, so it's a good reminder also too for the students there that you guys have the ability to post and ask questions to Ted. We'll make sure there's no incorrect inference, right? So feel free to post some questions. We'll be able to pull them up as we kind of transition here. Ted, great summary of your experience here, and obviously giving a window into your life and your successful career here at the Bears. For the students there, who are in the first chapter of their career, who would aspire to work for an organization like the Bears, and an NFL team, what are the skill sets? And I know at Northwestern they're getting tremendous tactical skills, industry-specific knowledge, but what are some things that have impressed you, and what are the skill sets that you look for, for a Chicago Bears employee that would give them some good things to think about?
Well, the communication skills are, I think, to me, are paramount. because I think young people today don't work on that enough. They're more focused on what you said, the specific skill set, the technical abilities. Another area that I think is if you find the ability to excel in is analytics. People that have the ability to understand analytics, whether it's on the sports side or on the business side, that's a skill set that is growing in need for sports organizations, whether it's in marketing research or in sports performance analytics. I think there's lots of opportunities there. I would also say that as you go through your master's program, if you can find internships, doesn't matter whether they're paid or unpaid, in whatever avenue you can get into, even if it's not in your specific area of study. What I find is that we all know a lot of people in this business, and I think most of us are willing to recommend individuals, and when you find someone who starts recommending young students in, say, in the ticket area, but that they have a certain skill set because they might have a sales ability, all of a sudden you're willing to trust that person and take an opportunity, give an opportunity to a young person in a different field, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and actually, I mean, I look at some of my own experiences, even coming here. You know, as an undergrad, I had a journalism degree. And when I got hired at the Bears at 24 years old, you know, I was hired for a job that didn't exist when I was 22.
Right.
And I think, you know, I look at some of the decisions in my career of making yourself uncomfortable and trying new things is a terrific way to grow. And, you know, I think some of those areas you outlined are a terrific example of that too.
Yeah, I think you have to be willing to push yourself, try new areas, and frankly, I think sometimes you need to experience certain different disciplines to find out what you don't like or what you're maybe not going to be successful at, and then ultimately find your way into the right area. And we're big believers at the Bears of continuity. When we find the right people, we'll find the right fit for them if they're the right personality, character fit.
And there's also a thought, you know, you never have to interview for a job, so to speak. If you manage an internship right, you know, you develop the trust and the communication, you know, that, you know, like you attracted an opportunity here and never left. I mean, I think there's somewhat of that opportunity that exists. If I'm a student, I've got the advantage of time, you know,
Yes.
that I'm not, you know, out there looking for a job that I need to, you know, get immediately. But if you can use that time while you're taking classes to take an internship, get that experience, get to know, you know, everybody from the receptionist to the CEO, and be a good person, contribute, how that can make a difference in your career.
You know what? I'm just a big believer in less about specific skill sets and in finding someone that truly has passion for what they do. And if you have passion for what you do, and if you don't take yourself too seriously, I think it's a very attractive feature, and you need to be able to laugh.
Yeah.
In pro sports, it's a lot of hard work. It's a ton of hours. Decent pay when you start, but maybe not the most competitive in terms of pay scale, because guess what? Everyone wants to work for a pro sports team. We try to pay fair, but with all those different elements, if you take yourself too seriously, if you think there's only one path to take, that's where you're going to miss out on opportunities.
And we are in the fun business at the end of the day.
It is. We're in the entertainment
exactly.
business. As much as it's highly competitive, and it is, the reality is on the field, the competition is fierce. And off the field, you're constantly sharing best practices with other teams in your league, with other sports leagues to try to just do the best job you can on the business front.
Except the Packers, though, right?
Yeah, we have no dealings with them. And I wish their CEO, Mark Murphy, wasn't such a good guy, but he is.
Who taught at Northwestern before? So,
yeah, it must be the
exactly,
Kellogg.
Exactly.
It's the Kellogg connection.
Exactly. But, you know, a little bit of insights there. I mean, it is a fun job, you know, I think for all the students that look at the CEO of the Chicago Bears, what's your favorite part of your role here? I mean,
Wow,
give us some
yeah.
insights into.
Yeah,
For those that work here, they walk past your office. You've got a great belly laugh, and
yeah, I do have a good laugh. I know that. People tell me about that, but it's because I truly love what I do. And part of the reason is I have such a diverse job. One day I'll be talking to the head coach, and another day talking to the GM about player acquisitions, and then 2 hours later having a meeting with our CFO or our VP of Sales and Marketing. So I'm in the position now where I can kind of get involved in whatever area I want to on a daily basis. So it's very diverse. But what I think I love the most that keeps me going in this business is the camaraderie, and it's that team aspect. So, you know, you need to be, if you want to get into pro sports, you have to believe in team. It's not about you. And when you have that team aspect, the emotions that drive that when you have success are incredible. You can't replicate that anywhere. And so when you have success on the field, and that translates on the business front, you know, there's plenty of credit to go around for everyone when you have success. And the emotional connection you have by being a team player in this business is just, it's paramount, and it's unbelievable with the kind of feelings you can get from it.
Yeah, and the Bears really, you look across the NFL, are really a family, you know,
Yes.
versus an organization, and that obviously starts at the top with ownership and you. But you know, I think one of the things that, you know, for students out there, an organization like the Bears, people come here and they never really want to leave. And I think what you just described is very unique in our industry.
It is, and you know, I've looked around the league to think, you know, what other teams would have the same kind of structure where you can feel that camaraderie, the family feel, and there aren't many. And a lot of that is ownership here hires people to do a job, they trust them to do the right job, and they let them go. They don't micromanage. There's a lot of people here who work at the Bears who treat the team's money as if it's their own. I think that's one of the things that kept me here as long as I have been here, is that you get a sense of ownership of the team, even though you're not an owner. And the tradition and the history, to be able to reflect back on that and to think that George Halas not only started the Chicago Bears, but started the NFL, is truly inspiring every day, and you think about that every day. Most of our employees do.
And also, too, I think one of the things that I love most about the Bears is, even for someone like me who did go on to other things, that family nature, you still feel a part of it as well. And I think that's as much a good lesson for students of building your network and your relationships is, you know, keep those relationships and those people that invested in you early on in your career and what that means.
It's very important, and sometimes we lose good people, like we lost you, but the reality is sometimes when individuals are ready to be promoted in their mind, there's not a spot for them. We're not a large company. Most pro sports organizations aren't. So when someone leaves for a better opportunity, to me, that's a good reflection that we hired the right kind of people. And it's amazing how many people leave here, and then somehow years later there may be another connection, like you, Dan. We've had a couple ex-players who I negotiated their contract for that now years later they're back here working for the Chicago Bears in different capacities.
That's terrific. You know, I think maybe the students are taking your advice a little too literally, that they're being good listeners. They're taking notes, but
no, you know, questions.
As we kind of wrap up in the final 5 minutes or so, just a reminder to post any questions. But I gave you a little bit of a softball on the fun part of your job. The reverse of that, I mean, it is work. There are challenges. What are some of the things that keep you up at night, or what are some of the toughest parts of being the CEO of an NFL team?
Well, I would say probably some of the more the bigger challenges that we need to overcome is I need another one of those Super Bowl rings. I had one 2 years into my job here, haven't had one since. So that always keeps me up at night as to, are we investing in the right players, the right amount of money? And the other thing that's always difficult is the media attention's 24/7. So you really have to develop thick skin to not let some of the criticism get to you on a personal level. And so one of the things I do is I don't listen to sports talk radio too long because it's nonstop, and it becomes a matter now of the news entities compete against each other to try to have big stories, and they're usually negative. So that's always tough, and you have to remind yourself not to make decisions because of what the media says. Just understand how they impact your business.
Does social media as part of that? I mean, obviously, talk radio it's a phenomenon unto itself. But when you look at feedback from social media and that, do you try to block that out as well, or how are you kind of internalizing those changes?
That's a good question. I don't. I think a lot of the social media comments appear to be less critical, as opposed to we try to find ways to have content that those on social media can kind of gravitate to and really become a different level of their fan, as opposed to being a critic.
Yeah, well, I think for at least the Northwestern community today, I think you'll get rave reviews on social media for.
I'm going to check it out
for sharing. So so we'll be sure to it. But I guess in summary, I mean, my takeaways from really getting insights into your career and advice. Again, it's open-minded, building that trust, being flexible. I think being a good listener. All of those are kind of we talk a lot about, sports analogies. Those are the intangibles, right? Beyond the talent and the skill that they will have in a varying discipline. Any ones that I missed there in closing that you think of?
Being able to ask questions and believe in yourself. I think it is those intangibles that it's a lot of talented people out there with the skill set you need, but it's the intangibles of being a great team player and a communicator that are going to really ultimately drive your career and give you more opportunities.
Great. Well, on behalf of Northwestern, I just want to thank Ted. We're giving you a virtual round of applause. See, we got to hear the laugh.
Yeah,
and thank everyone for joining, and we'll be signing off from Hallis Hall in the Bronco Nagurski room here in Lake Forest. Take care.
Thanks for the opportunity.